All right, good afternoon and welcome. We have a wide variety of topics to cover today. I have tried to hone these meetings in on fewer topics and to make sure that we are sending you information in our recently renewed process of using our special education headlines and our special education update memo that's going out on a regular basis. If you maybe we could just put in the chat again how people can get access to that regular update, if it's not too much to ask between members of my team who are here today, just to make sure that people know how to get that information. But we're trying to go a little deeper on topics in these meetings so that you get some of the various topics that come up in special education through our newsletter that's going out regularly these days, and appreciate everyone's work. What I would, but there are some things that I want to talk about today. Mainly, we're going to talk about two guidance documents that DESE is just putting out just this week. One is about students in institutional settings, so our special education services in institutional settings, and the other is the evaluation component of our guidance on referral, evaluation, and eligibility. And so we're going to go into those in greater length. But I'm going to kick us off actually by talking about CPACs. And just a quick reminder that November is CPAC Awareness Month. On tomorrow night, the Zakim Bridge is going to be lit yellow in honor of CPAC Awareness Month. And so if you happen to catch that, that icon of Massachusetts, just wanted to just remind you of that and really just sort of get us centered on the importance of CPACs and the great work that they do, that you do with them all together. I'm raising this because, I know how important family engagement is and how important the work of engaging with your CPAC. And so just wanted to show briefly that there is, and Brian's going to put this in the chat, a networking and professional development series for family engagement. And we've built it as being applicable to CPAC leaders and administrators. So these topics could be worthwhile to share with the director of your Special Education Advisory Council, and to perhaps think about having someone from your team attend as well. But this is our family engagement team here at DESE who's putting on this series of workshops. And we shared this information out recently, but I thought, if we take a minute to focus on CPACs, we just take a look here at what they're offering and just know a little bit more about what's coming up in the way of some I think really useful ideas around parent engagement and family engagement. And so just hope that you'll get a chance to take a look at that and see if it's applicable to you and your team and your CPAC director.
Russell, sorry to interrupt you. It seems we've run into the same glitch we had last time where people are not being allowed to let in. I've just been made aware that you might need to log off and log back in, and that should allow people to then all join in. That's what I've been making.
Yeah, absolutely.
So I will pause the recording.
So Brian, I'm gonna sign out. All right. So some updates for you today to begin with, on a little bit of a abbreviated time schedule. Really pleased to share with you that November is Special Education CPAC Parent Advisory Council Advisory Awareness Month, and the Zakim Bridge will be lit up yellow on Saturday night. So hope you can enjoy that if you happen to see it. I raised this issue, I talked to this issue about CPACs with the experienced special education directors yesterday when I had a chance to meet with them for their institute. And they gave me some really good feedback on this that I thought it is worth repeating today. So I will be brief on this, that Brian's putting in the chat the information about professional training that can be done, professional development that can be done for district administrators, as well as for CPAC leaders. And this is information that you might find useful. So Brian, thank you for sharing that. Just going back to other information about CPACs is that we want to update you on a decision from the Attorney General's office about CPACs and the open meeting law. Brian is putting in the chat the decision that came from the Attorney General's office about some complaints that were leveled against CPACs in Brockton, Melrose, and Brookline. And really a question was whether or not CPACs are subject to the open meeting law. And that was the central question. And there was a sub question about, is the leadership group, the leadership of a CPAC, also a body that is subject to the open meeting law? The decision from the Attorney General's office is that CPACs of these communities are not subject to the open meeting law, and nor are the officers from the CPACs are subject to the open meeting law. And I came at this from the perspective of posting the agendas. And what I appreciate about what the Attorney General said is that even though their CPAC is not a subject to the open meeting law, it's still a really good practice to advertise meetings to the public, to still go ahead and post the agendas, make sure it's clear about what the topics will be, allowing and really inviting that public participation in CPAC meetings is really important. What I loved about meeting with the experienced special ed directors yesterday, it was a smaller group of special education directors, 28 of us, about approximately a number, is that they gave me some really good feedback on how you could use this information to really support and help grow your CPAC in some ways. So for instance, they said, it's helpful that if you're not as worried about quorum the way that you are with open meeting law, it means that if you happen to start with a small group, you're not so concerned that you can't meet because you don't have a quorum. You would go ahead with the meeting. If you don't have your officers all at the meeting, you're not going to be kind of hung up on whether or not you can meet. We really want to make sure that CPAC meetings occur and that they are robust and that they're meaningful, and not having this as a worry just takes that one pressure off and maybe helps you kind of grow your CPAC by not having to worry about having a quorum or not. The other thing that I really loved about their feedback, so this is just advice from other special education directors, is that by not being held to the open meeting law, there will, when the point comes that we can't have virtual public meetings anymore, the CPACs won't be bound to that rule, that you would be able to continue to have virtual meetings. And if you are finding that parents are participating at higher rates virtually, that's a good thing. We want parents to participate. We want parent engagement in these meetings. And so you would be able to continue on having your meetings virtually even after other meetings go back to in person. So we just hope that that's useful information to you. I really appreciated the feedback that we got from those special education directors, and I just wanted to share that with you today. My next topic is some guidance that will be up on our website soon, that Brian is going to go ahead and put into the chat as well. And it's about Child Find. And so that OSEP recently issued their FAQ about Child Find. And what we wanted to do is just to follow up on that, because we have heard about some instances where students are either not identified as being in school, or they're not identified as being homeschooled. And so where are they? And how do we make sure that they're accounted for? And so this is guidance to let parents know, if your child is, school age and not enrolled and not attending yet, it just helps to know let parents know the process that they need to follow. And so we hope that this is a useful bit of information that could be helpful to you as you go ahead. Just moving on, I really am excited to bring to you an advisory that I've been working on for a little while here, about the shared responsibility between school districts and the state and DESE as it relates to students in institutional settings. And so students who are receiving special education services in institutional settings, it's really a shared responsibility between DESE and the school district. And we just thought that some of the information about that needed to be better clarified. So that's what we've done for you in the guidance document that we're going to share with you. Just by way of background, when we say special education in institutional settings, might be a term you're not all familiar with, because if you look down at the bottom of this slide here, during the 2020-21 school year, our program, our special education in institutional settings program, served approximately 550 individual students statewide. And here are the agencies where they're served: DYS, DMH, DMH Adult Services, County Houses of Correction, and the Department of Public Health. And you can see how many sites we have serving those 500 students, 550 students. So, the information I'm sharing with you might apply greatly to some districts and maybe less so to others, but it's something that it's good to, if you're actively involved with students being being educated in institutional settings, then I'd really ask you to look closely at this. If you're not, maybe just tuck it away. Just know that, should you down the road be, involved with a student who's in an institutional setting, this is information that could be really useful to you. So the key takeaway, if there's one thing that I want you to take away from this guidance, is that we really want to make sure that when a student enters an institutional setting to receive special education services, that the team reconvenes at that point. Because this idea of shared responsibility between DESE and the district really needs to get worked out and customized for that student upon the point of entry. And so really just that reconvene meeting allows our teams to come together and talk about how are we going to implement the IEP, how is the student going to be best served in what we call the host agency, those agencies that I just showed you. And then, what I really love about the idea of a reconvene is you're always planning ahead to exit. How are we looking ahead to what's going to happen once the student exits from the institutional setting and returns to their prior educational setting? So as I often like to do with you, I actually have the, oh, no, not that one, this one. This is the TA, the Technical Assistance Advisory that we just released today. And I've highlighted a few points in it that I just want to share with you. So it's really good to remember that as you engage with a student who's in an institutional setting, that DESE provides certain special education services to students, but DESE is not programmatically or fiscally responsible for the students who are in institutional settings. So while we provide a lot of the services that students receive in institutional settings, we don't provide all of the services. And the district maintains that programmatic and fiscal responsibility. And that's why it's so important to have that reconvened IEP meeting when a student enters an institutional setting, so that we can work out what is DESE providing and what are the additional services that might need to be provided by the district. So as we look at a little bit further into this, we've already talked about the importance of that reconvened IEP meeting. And then we know that, like I said before, what does it do? Really just collaboration on the implementation of the IEP. And then, thinking about how that student will be best served in that host agency. And I just love this idea of, planning for exiting, that exit at entry. The student is entering, but how are we already thinking about how they're going to exit when we come together and have that reconvened IEP meeting? And this is happening all across the state already. It didn't take this guidance to get that reconvening process going. Our contractor CES has been doing this throughout this school year, and they're sending us information about the number and the places where they're reconvening meetings, and it's been really gratifying to see these get off the ground more. And so just really encouraging people to keep it going. But just thinking about the idea that a student entering an institutional setting does not mean that we're changing their placement. And so that's just the final point that I wanted to call out from this guidance today, that the institutional setting is not a new placement for the student. And it's important to keep that in mind, particularly just for the purposes of stay put, that when a student comes back to the district, that they are able to return to where they were educated previously, or the team, if they make a different decision, that's fine too, but we're keeping that stay put right to what was in the student's IEP. So this is a fairly short piece of guidance, but hopefully impactful for a very vulnerable group of students who we want to make sure we're serving well and really maintaining their special education rights. And of course, as always, I'll be glad to take any questions about that at the end as well. So the next thing that I wanted to mention to you just briefly is that we have updated our PL1 and our PL2 forms. So we ask you to take a look at them. In our prep, I didn't make sure, Jamie, that Brian had these forms. Does Brian have them to put into the chat?
He does.
Okay, great. Thanks so much. So we just want to make sure that there's a very small adjustments to the PL1 and PL2 form, but we do ask that you begin to use them. And the key thing is that it's really identifying 5-year-olds who are already enrolled in kindergarten and really kind of separating out the difference between the PL1 for age 5 and up, age 5 enrolled in kindergarten and 6 through 22 for both PL1 and PL2. And, as you're going into the new IEP cycle, we just ask that you use these forms as we go ahead. So, Jamie, anything that I missed there? Really appreciate the work that you and your team have done on this.
And I missed some of the beginning, so I don't know if you said this, Russell, but the other update on the PL1 and PL2 is the changes that go with the SEIS advisory.
Right. The PL1 and PL2 forms also match this idea that we're not changing placement, that if you identify a student as being in an institutional setting, that doesn't actually change the placement that they had stay put rights to. Jamie, am I framing that correctly?
That's correct.
All right, thanks so much. Okay, so our last topic for today is to take a look at the evaluation section of our Massachusetts Referral Evaluation and Eligibility Determination Guidance. And so remember, this is replacing ICERs, and it is available on our website. I will share the link with you in just a minute. I'm going to show you the actual document, keeping in mind that the way that we have this developed now is that sort of interactive online portal, not a guidance document that we're printing and sending out, really so that you can get more quickly to the information that you need. It's meant to be used in kind of a digital format natively as opposed to a printed format natively. We did make a small change to the referral section that I just want to point out to you. So in a previous meeting this year, we went over referral. Today, we're going to go over evaluation. And then very soon we'll have the eligibility section done. So we're taking this in chunks. I know you're all today is just all right. So we just want to come back to the referral section that we went over earlier this year. And just the small change that we put in here, Jamie, correct me if I'm wrong, is just that we wanted to clarify that these are timelines for students who are ages 3 to 22. And so that's the main thing that you would look for, that we draw your attention for. We will, this is meant to be a living document, so there could be other changes that we're making as we go along, and we'll work to call them out to you. But this one in particular, we thought was important to mentioning today, that this is the timeline for students who are ages 3 to 22. Jamie, anything more that I should add there?
Nope, that is correct.
All right, well, without any further ado, let's look at the evaluation section. So here's the link that's in the presentation, and Brian is, I'm sure, also including the link in the chat. And I'm going to take you over to it right now so that you can we can delve into it together. So remember, this is what it looks like when you arrive at the guidance homepage for our referral evaluation and eligibility determination. And if I just refresh it, I can start at the beginning. And I can remind myself that what we looked at the last time, the introduction is here. The referral page is here. I'm not going to go over this again because this is what we looked at previously. And now today we're going to delve into the evaluation section, which has these components: planning for evaluations, essential components of planning for evaluations, special considerations, and then the evaluation process itself. And again, we will soon follow up with information about eligibility. That's the next section that we are in the process of building out right now. So let's just take a look. Evaluation planning, just a quick walkthrough. And what I think a lot of, I hope when you read this, that a lot of it, a lot of it you're already doing. But what we've really attempted to do here is to take information that is in statute and regulation, federal and state statute, and what's in our regulations, and pull it all together in a way that's hopefully more readable, more digestible, so that you can have the information that you need to execute on evaluation, for example, as it relates to this section. So you're going to see a lot of citations in here that take you to the relevant special education laws and regulations, but we've tried to write it in a way that, state keeps really close to what's in statute and regulation, but written in a way that is hopefully more user-friendly, and something that you can just, be thinking about and building upon your own knowledge base. And, I know that I obviously had to read this really closely before we launched it today. And I always think back on when I was a special education director, what would have been something that would have been confirming to me? And are there, little tidbits in this that along the way, maybe I lost sight of a bit and I need to bring back to my practice and bring back to my team's practice. So, as I'm presenting this to you today, you might think about sitting down with your team and having them review this and talking about it together, because this is our public facing document. This is where we want all stakeholders engaged with special education to go to get kind of the foremost information about these critical components of the special education process. And so, I think it would be just a good idea it's not long, it won't take you long to review it, and really just hopefully digest it and think about what is it that's in here that, maybe, either, again, confirms what you're already doing, or maybe there's some small changes that you want to be thinking about as well. And so I would imagine that, my evaluation team leaders, my school psychologists, just my assessment teams, could really benefit from just taking a look at this now that it's updated and, fully released. I know that previous versions, we had a draft, watermark on. This does not. This is live. And yes, it's a living document. We might make some changes along the way, but by and large, this is 100% ready to go and would encourage you to start using it. So when we think about evaluation planning, just a critical step up before we start evaluation, that we want to have our teams think about what they're doing to get going behind the scenes before we start an evaluation. And so here's those critical components. Some things that I love about what's here, identifying student strengths, but then also thinking about disability related needs. So that, we're coming at this from that strengths-based approach, that asset-based, while also identifying where a student's needs are. And then, just really kind of, delving into each of these critical components. But, you see this call out about, really thinking about how we avoid bias in the evaluation process and our tools that we're using as we're making the important decisions that will come from an evaluation process. So again, like I said, hopefully as you're seeing this, you're thinking that was short, got a lot of information packed in, but without being long-winded, like I am being right now. Thinking about the essential components of evaluation planning, 3 important sections here: parent participation, reviewing existing data, and then considerations that are from relevant federal and state requirements that would be really important. So let's just start with the parent engagement section. So really at the core of this is thinking about how do we engage with families before we start the evaluation process. As part of the planning, when we get that request for an initial evaluation, the recommendation here is about how are we seeking input from families about a student's strengths, about their successes, about their needed skill development, to really help us formulate what do we need this evaluation to be. And so it's all about communication in this parent engagement section. Moving on to reviewing the existing data, just thinking about, what does the existing data tell us about, what the level, where's the student at right now? What's their English language proficiency level? Are there any independent evaluations that we could take a look at? Any screening information, attendance, discipline records? And, again, I think this should be fairly confirmatory. I know your school psychologists do this, for example, and I know they do it well. And so, but are there some things on this list to maybe just like, oh, do we always look at that? Have we been, have we let one of these things go without realizing it that we want to bring back? And then what do we do with the data? How do we look at those patterns and use the information to develop the questions that we want answered through the evaluation process? And then finally, what you'll see here under the factors from federal and state regulations is, we've tried to just group them for you so that you're able to click on and see exactly what you need. But as we start evaluations, as we plan for evaluations, we have to be thinking ahead to, well, how are we going to use this information? And that's a lot of what these factors are all about. So how do we make sure that our evaluations to get good information are, free from racial and cultural bias, and, providing the assessments in the native or primary language or other mode of communication most likely to yield accurate information, right? So I think there's just some good information here. I know that, I often struggled with what do I do if I don't have a school psychologist who speaks the student's primary language? And so again, just having the citations here about, yes, we want to, work to do that first and foremost, but the or here is also important, or other modes of communication most likely to yield accurate information. So, a lot of times I use something like this as a litmus test. If I can't test in the student's primary language, then is what I'm doing, a mode of communication that will still yield accurate information. And those would be important terms that I'd be talking to my special education evaluation teams about. If we're making a different decision other than the primary language, are we using information that will yield accurate information? It's nice to know where the bar is, right? What are we working towards? And I think that's really important. So again, with each of these, you can see they just open up and give you more information. But hopefully, again, the way that we've organized this, if you don't need it, you don't have to open it and you can move on. Or if you do need it, you kind of know where to go to get it. With some, kind of key information, key questions at the end that again relate directly to the regulations that sort of back why we have to do this. The special considerations in the evaluation process are really about reevaluation, what makes reevaluation unique, and what is the reevaluation process. So take a look here at what are the requirements for reevaluation, and hopefully our graphic helps a lot of the same sorts of things that we saw before. Family engagement, reviewing existing data, looking at those patterns, developing questions, and then identifying the assessments. That's very familiar. That's not different. But there are some things in here that are important to look at in terms of what is different about a reevaluation, and some examples of thinking about reevaluation differently from an initial evaluation. So I just ask you to take a look at these examples, maybe talk about them with your teams as well. And then finally, the last part of this, we get into evaluation. And this is where we see, the evaluation actually being conducted and the reports being written. And so we've got sort of a 4-step process here, thinking about the purpose of the evaluation, whether the student has one or more of the defined disabilities, whether the students, what the present level of development and achievement is, what the educational needs of the student are, and then what services will most respond appropriately to the educational needs of the student. And I think really importantly, allow the student to progress in the general education curriculum. So, we're moving on now to, going from planning to finalizing those assessment tools, and, thinking about these key issues about the required assessments. So assessing in all areas related to the suspected disability, again, very confirmatory, that this is what you're doing. And that educational assessment that, again, this is tried and true. We're used to doing educational assessments. So a bit more information about both, what needs to be included in the educational assessment. And I really love the efforts that I see statewide to really breathe life into the educational assessment to make it relevant to the evaluation process as opposed to just a compliance step. So hopefully maybe thinking about those required elements of an educational assessment will help your teams think about how they can make this component strong and very relevant to the decision-making process that comes with evaluations. And then finally, we've got the optional assessments included here. We then begin to move on to reports. And just that reminder that we need to have that written summary of the report and what's included in the summary, which really goes back to the purpose of the assessment, right? There's a nice corollary connection between what we report about and what the purpose of evaluations are. Just that reminder that upon parental request, we provide those summaries of assessments to parents at least 2 days prior to the team meeting. Keep in mind that we updated the consent form. I think that was just before COVID started, actually, to include a box to make it a little easier for parents to check to say that they want those evaluations 2 days in advance, that they don't have to send a separate letter. So just a reminder to be looking for that on the consent form, and abiding by the parents' wishes when they want the evaluations, the summaries of the assessment reports sent to them 2 days prior to the evaluation, 2 days prior to the meeting. So the last thing that I just want to point out is that I know when I was thinking about this section about each team member providing a written summary, we want to just be clear that evaluators can combine their summaries into a single multidisciplinary report. I think that's such a good practice, depending on the age of the student, the needs of the student, but I've seen some really powerful multidisciplinary reports, and we certainly didn't want to make it seem like that can't continue to be a very effective process. And so we're just recommending that you continue to use that as a way of, when appropriate, using that to, really get to the purpose of the evaluation. Maybe you can get back to these key purposes of the evaluation better through a multidisciplinary report than you can through many different individual reports. So again, I hope what I've done for you today is to show you that this is succinct, to the point, really connects with all of the citations that we've included in here to the relevant statutes and regulations, but hopefully in a way that is user-friendly and maybe just a good learning tool for you and your teams, and hopefully a communication tool for anyone who you need to share information about what are the critical components of special education evaluation. So I'm going to go back to my PowerPoint for the last time today, just to let you know that we are anticipating in January of 2022 that we'll have the next section about eligibility completed. And so we look forward to sharing that with you at that meeting. We are continuing, this is part of our IEP improvement project, these sections that we are updating and getting out to you. So just keep in mind that we've got some really important components to the IEP improvement project, including what we just shared. We're also updating the parents guide. Our early adopters will get started with updated forms, and then a process guide to explain, frankly, how to use those forms, with always at the center of what we're trying to do is to improve student outcomes by making these changes to the IEP process. So I'm sure you're asking, what comes next? So just a reminder that for our new guidance on referral eligibility and evaluation, on referral evaluation and eligibility, this is mostly completed. We just have the eligibility section still to come. These others are either coming very soon or they're in progress. Keep in mind that the forms, we're saying that we want to make sure that we begin with draft forms this winter, that we would be getting out to our early adopters, and that we would add tips and strategies to the referral evaluation and eligibility guidance. So what you see in this, what we've released so far, is just the very factual information that you need that's tied to statute and regulation. What we look forward to adding to that are some tips and strategies to help make the guidance even stronger, and maybe again some critical things for you to be thinking about to just continually improve practice and work towards stronger student outcomes. So finally, we have some dates coming up. I know you've asked us to be clearer for your planning purposes about when our next meetings are. So we've set meetings on the following dates. We are not meeting in December, but we'll be back with you in January, February, and March. Here are the times. Feel free to make note now. We will continue to remind you through the newsletter that we put out regularly and our email blasts to you in advance of these meetings. But I hope for your planning purposes, you can get the next three added to your calendars so that we can be with you again soon. And we will, of course, continue to work out these Zoom issues. You would think that after, living through an entire pandemic here that we wouldn't have these, but you know what? It's an imperfect world, and we're going to embrace it, and we're going to be okay. And I appreciate everyone being here and bearing with us as we dealt with a small technical issue just take a deep breath, and we're back, and we are, at the end of the day, we are okay, because you know what? It's 1:50 and we have 10 minutes for questions and answers. So I couldn't be happier than at the end of all this. Jamie.